So the special guest number one is an alligator. Now, the reason that I had them bring an alligator, getting it. So the reason that I had them bring the alligator is that the alligator holds a really interesting place in the story of species extinction. The alligator, in 1967, years before the start of, or the implementation of the thank you. I was back to invasive species, and I'm like, no, that is so wrong. The Endangered Species Act. All right. So 1967, before the implementation of the Endangered Species Act, the alligator was listed as an endangered species, although it wasn't, quite called that at the time, because it was acknowledged that its numbers had gotten so low that it was really teetering on the edge of extinction. And then, of course, when the Endangered Species Act came about in the early 70s, then it was the first animal on. Now, the thing about the alligator is also the first animal off. So this is a species that came off. Now, what makes it so very interesting and so very unique is that the reason that the alligator was endangered in the first place is because it has this fantastic skin that people wanted to use for handbags and clothing and boots and all kinds of other things like that. And people love that. And so, and the other thing is, it's actually fairly tasty. Sorry. And relatively popular in, areas in the South where they are, prevalent. So they were way over-harvested, way over-harvested, and, sent them to the edge of extinction. When they came off the endangered species list, it was not because of a change of attitude. People still love to have alligator skin things. They still make them to this day. People still eat alligator meat, and in fact, it's more popular now than it was before. So the question is, how did that work out? Well, the way it worked out was that there was initially a ban on hunting of them, and you could not harvest them. But at this time, there were already things known as alligator farms, which is where they raised alligators the same way that you raise livestock. Any other kind of livestock, alligators are a type of livestock. So the way it works is that, in fact, until very, very recently, if you ran an alligator farm, then what you did was you took the eggs, and you might take the eggs from the wild. Initially, they were taking the eggs from the wild, and they still take the eggs from the wild. You would raise them in these farmed conditions, and when they grew to an appropriate size, you would sex them, and you would turn back the majority. You were required to turn back the majority of them and reintroduce them into the wild, the majority of the females, and then 10% of the males. And the reason that it was uneven that way is that in nature, they will produce, 5 eggs, and 4 of them will be female and 1 will be a male. Although there's a whole quirky thing, and this is another class I would talk to you about how they can change the sex of the offspring by the heat of the eggs, but that's a different story. Not relevant here. So what they would do is, even though reintroduction of species, as I've talked over and over again in a lot of different classes, is not the most successful route of allowing an animal to recover. It actually has a pretty darn low success rate. But on an alligator, the alligators, for a whole series of reasons, were pretty easy to reintroduce. And so they went roaring back, and their numbers became very, very strong, and so they were able to take them off of the endangered species list. But they did it through farming. Okay? It was not through a change in attitude. It wasn't because, you know, people weren't hunting them, none of that. So it presents a really interesting and challenging question. Is it appropriate to farm an animal for the purpose of killing it and allowing it to recover? Okay, so in the case of the alligator, they're letting go most of the females, but 90% of the males, they are killing, and they are skinning, they are eating it, you know, whatever. They're using it for parts, and they are using it like livestock. Now, the key part about the recovery of the alligator is there was never a real, you know, champion for save the alligator, you know, because let's be honest, adorable. This is a baby. When it becomes enormous, then it is scary, and people become afraid of it. And when you are afraid of something, and the question is whether or not you're going to save it, much like the titan boa we just talked about, I don't know, it might eat me, should I save it? I don't think so. So there wasn't a huge campaign about it. There wasn't, you know, cute little pictures of cute little alligators or any of the rest of it. It was a different kind of, you know, different kind of campaign. But when you are thinking about the whole farming situation, there are many other species that have been brought back in similar circumstances. There are hunting ranches in Texas where, I can give you 3 examples. One is a scimitar oryx, which was 32 animals. 32 animals. Brought back to about, the high point was almost 30,000. Then they passed a law that got everybody all upset, or, you know, people got upset over the concept of hunting the animals, and so they passed a law in Texas saying that, making it very, very difficult to have these animals in the hunting ranches, and as a result, the numbers have now dropped down to 11,000 because the hunting ranches had no reason to keep the animals anymore, so they killed them. That worked well. The addax, there were 2, and a lot of DNA, thank God. There was 2, and alternative DNA, that was brought up to the numbers of 7,000. The Dama gazelle, there were about 60 of them, brought up to 9,000, all on hunting ranches. But here's the thing. You have never heard a big outcry over the farming of alligators. It happens today. You know, they still have alligator farms, and they still do the same thing, and they still eat them, and they still kill them. But you've never heard a peep about alligator farms. And all of those fur-bearing, cute, you know, deer creatures that you see that make everybody go, oh, it's Bambi, we can't, no, don't be killing Bambi. Those animals have large areas, big, expansive. They are super well cared for. Now, the alligators are well cared for too, but it's not exactly, I mean, it's livestock raising. It really is. But again, you don't hear complaints about it. And you don't hear complaints because it's an alligator. Because of the mythology behind the alligator, because the alligator, quite frankly, is not a mammal. It's not fur-bearing. It's not particularly cute. They're cute when they're babies. About 15 minutes later, not so much. You're adorable. I'm sorry.
He called. You didn't hear it, but he called earlier. They make this whole call to them all. You rarely hear, but he did it. Which is neat.
He's a kind of a guy. So they can be adorable right up into the moment that they're not. And so, as a result, you know, it brings up a really interesting question, is all I'm saying, is how we value our species. You know, what we consider important to save, what we do not consider important to save, how we think we should save them, how we don't think we should save them. And by the way, the alligator is still has a protected status. Although it is off the endangered species list, it has a protected status, but it's a really interesting kind of protected status. It is a protected status of similarity of characteristics, because people cannot tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile, or a caiman for that matter, and the American crocodile is severely endangered. The American crocodile exists all, well down into Central and South America, and small populations in Florida, very small populations in Florida. So these guys still have this protected status and very strict rules over the farming and the harvesting and all kinds of other things, very much because of their similarity to crocodiles, to keep the crocodiles. And you may be asking yourself, well, heck, if they were able to do this with the alligator, the farming of the alligator, why aren't they farming crocodiles? Well, if you thought an alligator was scary, imagine what it would be like to try to deal with a crocodile. There are crocodile farms, but really few and far between, because they can turn nasty way faster than an alligator can. So, bye, guy. Say goodbye. Yes, I'm done with it. Oh, I don't go.